Minasan, konnichiwa. O genki desu ka? Today, we are going to tackle basic verbs in Japanese, which are called doshi. At the end of tackling this module, you're expected to define and identify different groups of verbs in Japanese, change verbs into their other forms, applying the rules of conjugations, make their own sentences based from their daily routines or the actions that you will do when having a tour, and translate them into Japanese. And lastly, explain the importance of learning the verbs and their different conjugations in having a good communication with the Japanese people. In this module, since you are going to tackle verbs, verbs are one of the first things that you need to learn about when we begin to study a certain language. When you begin to learn Japanese, you would have come across verbs many times while studying Japanese grammar. Verbs are crucial to the functioning of language. Without verbs, language cannot really do anything. After all, verbs are action words, just like wake up, eat, study, work, sleep, etc. Verbs can also connect two ideas together, just like the sentence, the flower is beautiful. Is there serves as a linking verb between flower and beautiful. And in this module, we will also discuss the three main groups of verbs, such as the Ru-Verbs, the U-Verbs, and also the irregular verbs. We will also learn how verbs are conjugated and change form to express action in the past, present, and the future. Ja, minasan, gambatte kudasai. The first thing that you should learn also in tackling verbs in Japanese is that you must know its form if it is similar with the English language. And verbs in Japanese are written like infinitive forms of verbs in English language. So when we say infinitive, that is having the structure preposition to plus the base form of the verbs, like the verb to eat. And commonly that functions as a noun also in the English language. However, in the Japanese, it functions as a verb. And this dictionary form is also known as the plain form that frequently appears in casual conversation and is also used in different grammatical expression. Of course, if you are speaking casually or informally, you will use the dictionary form, or you can use the dictionary form. However, if you are really speaking or you need to be polite in terms of speaking with other people, you will use the other forms of verbs, just like the MAS form, etc. And verbs in its dictionary form can also fall under three different categories, such as the Ru-Verbs, the U-Verbs, and also the irregular verbs. For the Ru-Verbs, we have here samples like to eat, which is taberu, and to see or watch or to look, that's miru. So root verbs typically contains an e or e sound on the previous alphabet before ending with a ru. Notice the construction of the verb taberu. So that ends before the ru, the word ends with the vowel e, and also the miru, it ends with the vowel e. It's really important to really know the group of verbs if they are classified under the root verb, the verb, and the irregular verb, because the conjugation or the transformation depend on their groups. Unlike in the English language, that there is no such thing of grouping what particular classification does the particular verb belongs to. And another is the verbs. Try to notice that commonly these verbs end with the vowel u, just like the verb nomu, which means to drink, yomu, which means to read, kaku, which means to write, sukao, which means to use, hairu, which means to enter, and suwaru, which means to sit. Try to notice their structures. All of them ends with the vowel u. That's why they belong to the u verbs. And we also have the last group, which is classified as the irregular verb or the group 3. In here, we have the exceptions, just like the verb suru, which means to do, and we also have kuru, which means to come. If you notice, these verbs also end with ru. However, they are not classified under the root verb because they are in the irregular verb, suru and kuru. For example, you have the verb kaimono suru. So if ever you want to go shopping or buying groceries or buying anything from a store, then you are doing the kaimono suru. That means to shop or to buy one's groceries. And Japanese verbs are typically split into three groups again, the root verbs, the U-verbs, as well as the irregular verbs. And each of these tend to be conjugated differently. So we will be discussing about that also in this section. Although Japanese verbs assume a variety of conjugations depending on tense and their function within a sentence, the three most basic verb forms are the dictionary form, the MASU or the MAS form, and the te form. So since we had talked about the conjugation, conjugation literally means the variation of the form of a verb in an inflected language because they serve a specific function. For example, the function of the dictionary form is to know where the verbs belong in terms of grouping, and also you can use the dictionary form in speaking casually or informally to other people, and the masu or the mas form is used for polite expression, and the te form is used, for example, in having the kudasai or the please form, and also in expressing the progressive form of the verb. So in this picture, we have different samples of the verbs that were already introduced to you. We have yomu, which means to read, sowaru, which means to sit, miru, which means to see, kako, which means to write, taberu, which means to eat, tsukao, which means to use, nomu, which means to drink, and hairu, which means to enter. So these are the 8 basic verbs that you need to remember in terms of speaking and in writing. And you must also consider where these verbs belong so that you will know how to conjugate or transform them depending on the context of your sentences. And it would be better also to really learn different vocabularies if you are interested to learn and understand a particular language. And remember, with the exception of only 2 exception verbs, all the verbs fall into the category of root verb or U verb. And again, all root verbs end in ru, while U verbs can end in a number of U vowel sounds, including ru, just like taberu. Taberu is an e vowel sound, so it is a root verb, and wakaru is an a vowel sound, so it is an U verb. Another examples here, we have classified them into the group 1, the U verb, group 2, the root verb, and the third group, the irregular or having the exception. So we have to speak, which is hanasu, to ask or to listen, which is kiku, to swim, which is oyogu, asobu, which means to enjoy oneself or to have fun, matsu, which means to wait, nomu, which means to drink, kao, which means to buy, aru, which means to have, and shinu, which means to die. And for the group 2, the root verb, we have to see, miru, to eat, taberu, to sleep, neru, to wake up, okiru, to teach, oshieru, and to go out, deru, and to be or to exist, that's iru, and to think is kangairu. And the 2 irregular verbs are the suru and kuru. Suru, which means to do, and kuru, which means to come. So all those that are enclosed in the parentheses are the dictionary forms of the verbs. So let's proceed to the next topic for this session, which is the MASU form of the verbs, which are typically used in conversations when you are trying to be more formal or to be more polite. So in making the MAS form, we'll have first the group 2 or the Ru-Verbs. For example, taberu, which becomes tabemas. You notice here, what you are going to have as the rule to remember is that you are going to remove or delete ru and replace it with masu or mas, because you can drop the u sound at the end to sound like a native. So taberu, which becomes tabemas, tabemasu. Miru becomes mimas. So tabe, delete the ru and replace masu or mas. Miru, delete the ru and add masu, which means to see, mimas. The second rule is on the mas form of the group 1 or the U-verbs. You have here samples like nomu, kaku, tsikao, hairu, and suwaru. So the general rule that you need to remember in writing the mas form of the U-verbs is that you need to change the last alphabet in its dictionary form to a similar one ending with an E sound before attaching masu. So let us say, for example, the word kaku, which means to write, that will become kaki. So ku turned into the E vowel, E column, which becomes kaki and add mas. So kaku, dictionary form, make it polite, become kakimas. And nomu, it ends with mu, turn that into its E form or the E column ni, nomi, and you add masu. So nomu, to drink, becomes nomimas, nomimas. The same with the other. So tsukao becomes tsukai plus mas. And hairu becomes hairi and add mas, hairimas. Suwaru becomes suwari and add mas, suwarimas, which means to sit. Tsukaimas means to use, and hairimas, which means to enter. And for the group 3, the irregular verbs, it's very simple to learn because you just make suru to shimasu or shimas. Let us say, for example, copy, to copy. Just like what they are doing in the picture, they are copying the sample in their painting. So they are having the action of copy suru, copy suru. So that suru becomes shimasu, copy shimasu. That's why they are irregular. So just like shopping, kaimono suru will become kaimono shimasu. And the other form or the conjugation of the verb that you need to learn is the te form, because these are or these can usually be conveniently used to create a wide variety of grammatical expressions. So let us say you want to ask for a favor and you need to use please, or to say please in Japanese, you need to put the word kudasai. So before you add the kudasai, you need to change the form of the verb into its te form. And also in expressing the progressive action, you need to change also the verb into its te form before you are going to have ima. So let us say, for example, the sentence, I am eating. I is watashi. Am eating is in the progressive form. Therefore, it should be in the te form of the verb. So, watashi wa tabete imasu. Tabete, that's the te form of taberu, which means to eat, and you add imasu. Tabete imasu. And also, please help me. Please help me. Help is titsudao, and its step form, it's tetsudate, and you add please, which is kudasai, tetsudate kudasai. Please help me, tetsudate kudasai. So these are some examples of the te form and the rule to remember in transforming. So first, we are going to tackle the first group, the U-verbs. So that's why if you notice, it's really important to really classify well the verbs in terms of grouping so you will know how to apply the rules in transforming them or conjugating them into its mass form, the te form, and the other forms of conjugation. So let's start with the first group, the U-verbs. So in here, you just need to remember their endings. Let us say, for example, of course, all of these ends in the dictionary forms, all of these ends with the u, the vowel u, and you need to turn them into the te form. So all those verbs that ends with su, just like hanasu, you turn that into shte. So hanasu becomes hanashte, that's to speak. And kaku, that ends with ku, so you replace ku into ite. So kaku, which means to write, becomes kaite. Kaite. Please write. Kaite kudasai. Please speak. Hanashite kudasai. The third one is oyogu. That ends with gu. So you delete gu and replace ide. Oyoide. Please swim. Oyoide kudasai. Or I am swimming. Watashi wa oyoide imasu. So it's ide. And we also have here nomu, which means to drink. So mu, change to inde. So please drink. So nonde. Nonde kudasai. So I am drinking coffee. Kohi o nonde imasu. So that's it. So you are going to change the mu into inde. And same with the bu. Asobu, to enjoy oneself or having fun. So it ends with bu. What you are going to do is replace bu with an inde. Asunde. Asondimas. I am enjoying myself. I am having fun. Sondimas. And we also have the nu shinu, which means to die. So shinde. So some of the anime that you had watched, mostly the villains or those who are having cool characters, they will say to their enemy shinde, shinderu. So shinde there is die, please die, or you die. So that's from nu to ende because to die is shinu and its step form is shinde. So literally, if you notice why we are having de, not only te, when in fact it's in the te form because that's the ruling. It's either te or de. But in terms of the grammar function, that is classified as the te form. And next to the nu is the ru. So for the ru, u, and tu, all those words that end with these syllables, ru, just like hashiru, which means to run, become hashte, hatte. And we also have kakao, which means to bike, katte. And matsu, which means to wait, matte. That's why in the expression that you have learned is Matte kudasai. Chotto matte kudasai. Please wait for a while. So matte there is the te form of the verb matsu, which means to wait. That's the ruling for the first group or the group one on the u verbs. Like here, buy for the cow, it becomes katte, matsu becomes matte. And take a picture, sashi no tutte, so totte here. You notice since they're having the te form, double T, that's represented with the small t or chisai t. And we also have nomu becomes nunde, asobu becomes bu, replace bu with inde, and shinu replace nu with inde. And we also have here the second group. For the second group of the verbs, we have the Ru-Verbs. It's very easy because what you are going to delete here is the ru only, replace ru with te. So just like taberu, which means to eat, it will become tabete. So I am eating, tabete imasu. So te, tabete kudasai, please eat. So tabete. So the ru basically is replaced with te. Miru becomes mitte. And the last group, on group 3 or the irregular verbs, you have there suru, which means to do, and kuru, which means come, to come. So suru becomes shite, shite. So that's pronounced as shite. And kuru, which is the come, becomes kite. So since the shortcut technique is not applicable, you really need to memorize them. Let us say you are doing studying or to study is benkyo. literally benkyo. And since that's somehow to do studying or studying as an action, you add suru to that. So benkyo suru. So you replace suru with te. So benkyo suru, which becomes benkyo shite. Please study. Please study Nihongo. Nihongo benkyo shite kudasai. Or I am studying benkyo shite imasu. And bring or come. Takuru becomes kitte. For example, please bring. So when you come, please bring something. So motte kuru and it becomes motte kite. Motte kite kudasai. Let us say, please bring a gift. So gift is poresento. So poresento motte kite. And for the group 1, verbs and some conjugations we have here also. Somehow this serves as the summary. We have first the dictionary form, and on the 5th column is the English translations of the verb. You notice all of these are expressed into infinitives, and on the 2nd column you have the polite form using the MASU or the MAS form, and on the 3rd is the te form, and on the 4th one is the Thai form. So the Thai form was not discussed a moment ago. It's very easy because you need to have its conjugation based on the MASU form. And basically, the Thai form means want to. Let us say, for example, I want to walk. Arukitai. Arukitai. I want to walk with you. Ishoni arukitai desu. So, tai means want to. So, let us have the examples. Aroku, which is to walk becomes arukimasu. So, for the group 1, since these are the U-verbs, what you need to do is to change I, the last U of the verb, to I vowel. So aroku becomes aroki and add masu. Arokimasu. Asobu, asobimasu. Ao, aimasu. Iku, ikimasu. Kairu, kairimasu. Kako, kakimasu. Kao, kaimasu. Kiku, kikimasu. Tatsu, tachimasu. Utao, utaimasu. Yomu, yomimasu. And the te form, you need to remember also the ruling. So the ku becomes ite, bu is replaced with inde, and u replaced with the te, double T and te, and iku, the ku replaced with the te also, and the ru still replaced with the te, with the double T, and ku becomes ite, and so on and so forth. So aroku becomes aruite, asobu becomes asunde, ao, ate, iku, ite, kairu, kaite, and kaku becomes kaite, and kao becomes katte, that's to buy, and kiku, kite, tatsu, tate, utao, utate, yomu, yonde. And for the Thai form, as what I've told you, this means want to do the action. So what you are going to have is you need to depend it with the masu form of the verb. You delete the masu and you replace that with tai. So arukimas to arukitai, asubimas to asubitai, aimas to aitai, ikimas to ikitai, kairimas to kairitai, kakimas to kakitai, kaimas to kaitai, kikimas to kikitai, tachimas to tachitai, otaimas to otaita, yumimas to yomitai. And all of these are the English translation of the group 1 verbs. And we proceed with the group 2 verbs, which ends with the ru. So it's very easy in terms of its masu form. You just delete the ru and replace that with mas, just like dekakiru, which means to go out, dekakimas, and ireru to insert, iraimas, kangairu, delete the ru, add mas, kangaimas, kariru, to borrow, karimas. To decide, kimeru becomes kimemas, miru becomes mimas, neru becomes nemas, uboiru becomes uboimas, osheru becomes oshimas, steru becomes temas, and taberu becomes tabemas. And same ruling with what I had explained a moment ago, that in having the te form for the group 2 verbs or the Ru-Verbs, you just delete the ru and replace that with the te. So, dekakite, irite, kangaite, karite, kimite, mite, nette, uboite, oshite, stete, tabite. And for the Thai form, same ruling with the group 1. You just replace the MASU form with the Thai. Dikakitai, iritai, kangkaitai, karitai, kimitai, mitai, nettai, uboitai, oshitai, statai, tabitai. And all of these are the English translation of the verbs. Last is on the group 3 verbs or the irregular verbs and their conjugation. So just like what I have taught you, you just change suru to shimas in having the masu form, and in having the te form, you just change suru to shite and kuru to kite. And for the Thai form, you just replace mas with Thai, or if you make it in whole, you replace shimas to Thai. So let's have the anay suru or to guide becomes anay shimas, benkyo suru, which means to study, benkyo shimas, junbi suru or to prepare, junbi shimas, to marry is kekon shimas, kuru to come kimas, and ryoko suru, that's to travel, ryoko shimas, and to cook, ryori shimas, and to stroll or to walk around, just like to walk around in a park, that's sampo shimas, and to clean or to make the place tidy, that's soji shimas, and to drive unten shimas. And for the that form, you just replace the turu to shite, anay shite, binkyo shite, junbi shite, kekkon shite, kite, ryoko shite, ryori shite, sampo shite, soji shite, unten shite. And for the Thai form, that's to want, let us say, you want to guide, you want to study, etc. So anay shite, benkyo shite, junbi shite, kekkon shite, kitai, ryoko shite, ryori shite, sampo shite, soji shite, unten shite. And all of these are the English translations of the given verbs. So these are just the basic conjugations of the verbs you have learned so far, the MASU form, the te form, and the Thai form. Of course, there are plenty of conjugations, but since we are just tackling the basic verbs in Japanese, then we'll just end with the Thai form. I hope you have learned something new with the basic verbs, and I hope that you have gained additional knowledge now on using the Japanese language. じゃあ皆さんお疲れ様でした。どうもありがとうございました。じゃあね、バイバイ。See you in the next module. Bye.